Hello, and welcome to Happy Times and Places, in which I get a friend to nominate a Doctor Who story for me to watch. They have secretly chosen their favourite things about it, and I have to guess what they are. So let's travel towards Sylvester McCoysville for this one, and to find out what it is about this story that makes us go boo. You're listening to Happy Times and Places, a Doctor Who commentary podcast with me, Toby Hadoke. So, in case you haven't yet guessed what our story is, although to do that means you won't have read the show listings or any of the material that's actually got you listening to this, but come on, let's continue with the facade. Here's my special guest, who's going to tell you a little bit about himself and the reasons why he's chosen this story.
Hello, Toby. Hello, everyone. I'm Jon Turner, or John Nathan Turner, if you prefer, but not that one, despite the moustache. And I am an artist and illustrator based in Manchester. My last official Doctor Who illustration project was for last year's Chinese re-release of 12 Doctors, 12 Stories, so I'll let you off if you missed that one. Although, call yourself a fan. Anyway, Toby, the story that I've chosen for you this week is one that's very dear to my heart. It is Battlefield. Now, Battlefield has the honour of forming not just my first Doctor Who memory, but my first TV memory of any kind. So I would have been 3 years old on the original broadcast, although the third episode fell on my 4th birthday. And the scene where the Doctor goes down into a dark tunnel, that is my earliest television memory of any sort, which I'm sure is something a psychoanalyst could have a lot of fun with. Anyway, Battlefield was rebroadcast in 1993, by which point I was a very Doctor Who obsessed 7-year-old, and as I'm sure many fans of a certain age can relate, at that point you had to grasp whatever Doctor Who you could get and treasure it. And my parents had bought their first VCR that year, so I watched Battlefield and the other stories that were broadcast in 1993 many, many, many times. Although I've never quite forgiven my dad for forgetting to record episode 3 of Genesis of the Daleks. Battlefield also, Toby can correct me if I'm wrong here, has the dubious honour of having the lowest audience figures of any original broadcast Doctor Who story. So I think it is ripe for a re-evaluation. So that's your job, Toby. I'm going to enjoy this £5 lemonade. You enjoy Battlefield, and I will be back later to tell you 5 of my favourite things. Wicked.
Hello, my name is Toby. It's nice to see you or imagine you are there. Today we are going to watch episode 1 of Battlefield. So if you're watching along, I hope you're ready to press play or enter now. And I've got it on glorious Blu-ray. Yes! Okay, it's the beginning. Gosh, the final season of Doctor Who. And as Jon said, Jon Turner, lovely Jon Turner, who is a friend and colleague of mine. And I'm not quite sure how I've got a friend and colleague who was 3 when this was on, because I was 15. What am I doing hanging around with a 3-year-old? God, that ages me. It's funny as you get older, isn't it, that your adult friends, you can't imagine, are people that you would have nothing in common with when you were a teenager or whatever. How the ages get closer together. So we're doing a McCoy. Not the first McCoy I've done on this. Already done Delta and the Bannermen, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Recap. 1989, I was a furious Doctor Who fan. Old Doctor Who was good. New Doctor Who was bad. I was terrified that anything that Doctor Who did wrong, even a bad tree... Actually, this is the first time I've watched this since I got into gardening. I watch things now and get house envy. I'm now getting pot plant envy. I like a garden centre. What have I become? But yeah, when I was this age, I was furious with Doctor Who and worried that any mistake it made would one go, oh, mention of Sergeant Benton, 10 points. That's what it was like in those days. But anything that might jeopardise the future of Doctor Who would make, or mean my friends at school the next day would mock me, would be bad news. Although a lot of my friends sadly didn't watch Doctor Who, but I was always on the lookout. So I wasn't. I think I was quite creative, wasn't I? But as far as Doctor Who concerned, I was very defensive and very cross. I mean, I see it now on Twitter, so I understand it. It's partially what this is about. I love that shot. That's a great shot, and it looked like, because there was a trailer for this where Sergeant Zbigniew featured quite heavily, and he hadn't been mentioned in any of the pre-publicity. And there's something about sort of this season with a Polish sergeant, and the units are very international in this, which seemed so sort of fresh and interesting. And then you've got the Russians in a couple of stories' time, and suddenly those sorts of voices that you didn't really hear, they weren't your go-to foreigners in sort of earlier iterations of Doctor Who or television that I watched. I think they might have been in some more sort of adulty programs. But so having Eastern European voices and it just seemed slightly fresh and slightly new, and it made it seem sort of slightly more grown up, slightly less cliched. Than if he'd been, I don't know, French or German or whatever. Love the Dark TARDIS too. I've got to remember to. I'm only supposed to be eating until 8 o'clock. I'm 15 stone. And it's interesting, you think, what, 15 stone? You can't even be a character actor these days and not be chiselled. Worse for women, but I don't care. I'm watching Doctor Who at midnight. It's Battlefield. And I'm having a naked bar. I really like the Dark TARDIS. I wish they'd done it, and it's because they didn't have many TARDIS scenes under Andrew Cartmel, did they? I think that was a policy. He was a script editor who found the TARDIS scenes sort of wasteful scene setting, and I think that's a good decision. Although it makes this fun to see the TARDIS again, and it's atmospheric because of the darkness, and that whispering voice is good. So that's all good. But as I said, I didn't like the story at the time, and it's certainly nobody's favourite story. Yes, somebody will now tweet me and go, I think we'll find it's my favourite story, but it's not generally a well-loved story. But I remember, it's weird because I remember quite enjoying watching it and being cross with it at the same time. How can you love something and yet be cross? But I'm finding that in lockdown. We're like that in lockdown, aren't we? We get crossest with the things that we love, don't we? Because instead of enjoying we take the things we love about them for granted, and then focus on their bad. That's what this podcast is about. Jimmy Ellis. I worked with him not long after this. My first ever professional job. Merchant of Venice. He played Shylock, and I played Man from Antonio and Leonardo. They have 3 lines between them. I say it was a professional job. I was a local schoolboy at the Ludlow Festival and applied to be a spear carrier, and they needed somebody to do 3 lines, and I did them. But it was a professional theatre job. It took me ages to realise that they were actually knights flying down. Nice to see Jimmy in Doctor Who. He was a very, very nice man, and his son Hugo was in The Merchant of Venice, and I only discovered relatively recently. Jimmy had a sad story because I love the light rising from the earth. That's lovely. That's Anselin, isn't it? I like that, and that music is good as well. Kev McCulloch gets some stick. He sort of made the stories race along, I think, and I was of an age where I didn't listen to pop music particularly, but I did have Doctor Who incidental music on tape. So the Kev McCulloch music I'm rather fond of, and people say it's a bit full on, but I like it. It to me it helps with the pace, and these stories need to crack along, I think. And I loved Doctor Who's sort of anti-nuclear thing because I was young and you know, nuclear was bad. It's interesting now that we think of nuclear power as potentially better than stuff that drains fossil fuels, etc., etc. But you know, we were very, and the Labour Party at around this time, you know, your choices were the Tories and who were pro-nuclear, and Labour Party, I mean, for some of the 80s, were you know, nuclear disarmament, and that was a reason for well-meaning liberals like me to go, oh yeah, that would be a marvellous thing, and nuclear. It's weird because he comes up and salutes, but he was coming up and saluting a lot earlier then, so that's the longest salute. It's just a slight tweak in the edit. It's just a slight, too long in the edit. And also, he doesn't get, I don't know who that soldier is. He's got a line, but he doesn't get a credit. Which I always, it's an injustice I always feel for the uncredited speaking actor. But yeah, it's interesting how hot the nuclear issue was. And I was delighted that Doctor Who is taking it on. That's quite right, you know. I was a very idealistic young man. We were very idealistic, sort of liberal family. SDND badges, all that. And, I mean, the BBC did a nuclear season. I didn't sleep. They showed a thing called The War Game, which had been banned. So I wanted to watch it because it had been banned. Not because I was drawn to the sexiness of something that had been banned, but because it was like an archive gem. I watched it. And it was terrifying, and I went to my sister's bedroom and said, I want to sleep in here tonight. And I said, please tell me that's not going to happen. And she said, it probably will, but not for a few years. That was as reassuring as she got. And I remember thinking, so I think this was mid-80s, so I'd have been 10 or 11. And I remember thinking, oh, well, if I make it to 21. So the nuclear stuff, yeah. And some of this was in the trailer. And whenever the Doctor turns up, all hell breaks loose. I'm ashamed. It's sad we don't see any more of Zbigniew, Robert Jezek, who is of course Frobisher in the Big Finish CDs. He's a good voice man. He's Canadian, but of Polish stock. I had a chat with him once about his Polish heritage. He's got some really interesting things to say. Everybody's got an interesting story. But yeah, I like the Blue Caps. They seem to me like a sort of convincing international sort of peacekeeping kind of force. It's a slightly more grown-up way of doing UNIT than in the past, which I rather like. I was just going to say the Brigadier is wearing one of Doctor Who's rare cardigans. They've both got cardigans on. I've never noticed that before. I quite like a cardigan, and I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago. Oh, we changed, don't we? Double cardigan, goodness, he's got a nice house again. I wouldn't have cared 10 years ago. This is property porn now. Oh, what could I do with that sort of... That's a hell of a garden, though. They must have people. Oh, yeah, this was in the trailer, too. This was the start of the trailer, I think. And I used to take the trailers and watch them over and over again. And a cravat, too. I'm rocking the Brigadier's look. That's who I would cosplay as. I'd cosplay as the Brigadier doing his garden. It's essentially how I dress now. I know I'm being very casual, but there's a plague on with nobody's doing it. I haven't done anything for 6 months. Even the relaxing cardigan seems a bit too formal for the plague time. And again, this is, this is the equivalent of at the time, the late 80s, having a black female brigadier. God, Twitter would explode if the equivalent was of being as woke as anything. Of course, it doesn't seem unusual now. I think it was unusual then and laudable, so to do. I really like Angela Bruce. The shame thing, I've since read that's because they imagined her, or it was written that she would be speaking in with a West Jamaican accent, West Indian accent, and shame sounds, that is something that would work if delivered in that way. Now it just sounds like they were gonna have her swear, and then they don't have her swear, and it's a shame it doesn't quite work. Shame, or shit. It was really nice to see Noel Collins, because he was one of the desk sergeants in Juliet Bravo, which was a great series and a better series than I gave it. When I was younger, it was just, Saturday evening entertainment. I've got them on DVD now. It's a cracking show. And so it's nice to see Noel Collins, who's sadly no longer with us. He had lung cancer. I think he took a cigarette company to court. He was part of a conglomerate, I think, of people that... I think he was quite a heavy smoker. Of people who tried to take a cigarette company to court as a result of lung cancer. I like John's joke at the beginning about his £5 lemonade. £5 for a glass of lemonade. I don't know. No, glass of lemonade's still not £5, is it? I remember finding the sparks from the gun a bit too showbiz. I like the sort of sparks you see on top of the pops, rather than the sort of sparks you see emit from an alien energy weapon. Let's see how they've aged. This is certainly rattling along. And I remember loving all of this stuff. I don't like those sparks, but that's okay. This is great stuff. Look at this. Medieval knights on 20th century Earth. This is terrific. I like the sword fight. I like a sword fight. And I like the hair coming out of the back of the helmet. The sparks and the guns aren't great, which is a shame. That's Christopher Bowen, isn't it? He was rather big news. I think his bottom had become quite famous in a drama that I forget the name of now, and it wasn't a drama. I seem to recall it being sweaty and set in Singapore or something. And everybody watched it, but I didn't. But his picture was everywhere, so I was very excited when somebody from a programme that I didn't watch, but that everybody talked about, was cast in Doctor Who. But isn't it interesting how fame works? Because I suspect... I've seen him pop up in a few bits and bobs. He was in a thing called Castles that Sarah Griffiths was in about 5 years after this. So he had quite a purple patch of doing a lot of work, and he's in the Richard III. He's only at the very beginning, but it's a movie. So it's a good credit of Ian McKellen. And he's got a good sort of leading man, handsome ex-public school leading man kind of face. He looks not unlike Matthew McFadden, that terrific actor who's not been in Doctor Who, which I think is a shame. His wife, Keely Hawes, was in Time Heist, but Matthew McFadden has not been in Doctor Who. I'd quite like to see. I think he'd have been quite an interesting, enigmatic Doctor Who. This is June Bland, who was Berger in Earthshock, who was married to Bill Sellers, who directed The Celestial Toymaker. I like the fact her character is is blind. My other half might get quite cross because my other half is a disabled actor. I think she says no, does she say actor? Actually, I know some people get cross about one and some people get cross about the other, and I don't care either way. So just imagine she says the one you like. And my partner would say, and campaigns to get better disabled representation on the telly. And I remember we watched, what's the one with the superhero who's blind? That one. And I remember we watched the first episode of that. I said, "You'll like this. It's a blind superhero." And she said, "Is the actor blind?" And then there was this one take fight scene. And I went, "I don't think so. No." So nice to see. Of course, that this was scary because the Brigadier was back, and it was Storm over Avalion. It was going to be called. But it was exciting because it was touching the past because Jean Marsh is there and she'd been in Doctor Who back then. Of course, she'd been in the Dalek Master Plan with Nicholas Courtney. It's a Dalek Master Plan reunion. Oh, poor tree. But of course, the way it was sold was that, is the Brigadier going to die? We spent the whole thing on the edge of our seats. Well, knowing that if he was going to die, it wouldn't happen till episode 4, but with a real possibility that they were going to kill off the Brigadier. I'm glad they didn't, because he got to be in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and Jimmy didn't really know how to use that phone, did he? He was a very nice man, James Ellis. He was a good actor. He was Shylock in this Merchant of Venice, and he had a real twinkle. And he had a sad story. One of his sons was murdered, in London, stupidly, and he just had. I love that bit. Waiting for me. That's great. And when I worked with Jimmy, he had a young son called Toto who'd just been born. So yeah, he was a twinkler, was Jimmy. 'Cause he was quite old then. And it was really weird because I put something nice on Facebook or Twitter when Jimmy died, and a comedian colleague of mine, my ex-comedian really, and so one of his workmates. He showed one of his workmates my Facebook post, and it was Jimmy's son Toto, who was no longer 2, was now a grown man with a profession. But that Merchant of Venice we did, I worked with another of Jimmy's sons, Hugo, and I only recently discovered that Hugo took his own life and predeceased Jimmy. So Jimmy lost 2 of his kids, which I just think, for anybody with kids, that's the one thing you mustn't do is predecease your children. I think that's so tragic. Now, this is quite... Yes, I remember being furious with this. How... Do we like this, everybody? Do we like the boom scene? I don't even know if I've been seen on... Used to be this camera. I mean, it's... Don't do alliteration if it's not. Yeah, I know I have to accentuate the positive. So I like the hand grenade. I didn't quite understand what was going on here. It's a sign of the budget, really. They have a good stab, but that whole sequence doesn't really work. I like Xiao Yung's red stockings. I'm trying to accentuate the positive. Yeah, yeah. Okay, look. Can't all be great. But I'm enjoying this much more than I did at the time. But of course, at the time, I was furious young man. Got nothing to lose now. And John is right. This is the lowest rated, which is a good sign that the series went up in the ratings. That's a great shot with the shadows and the the shadow of the otherwise unforgivable umbrella. And I like the way that they go, "Who's that?" together. And this is an underrated performance. I think Marcus Gilbert is great. He became quite big news. It's the thing about Christopher Bowen as well. I sort of interrupted myself, which happens a lot. Is that you can be big news as an actor for a while and then not be, and that's been a real lesson when following the fortunes of Doctor Who actors, how sort of fleeting and meaningless a lot of it is, which makes steady underachievement for most of one's professional life not seem so bad. And Angela Douglas, now she was the sort of person my mum sort of knew more than I. It was good. I sometimes think John Nathan Turner spent extra money on people who brought no value because nobody knew who they were except him. But actually, his casting policy was often quite interesting. And I actually think one of the joys of watching Doctor Who is sometimes watching somebody you would go, "Oh, that's a bit of miscasting," or "That's slightly left field," and it works. And some of the best performances in Doctor Who, casting William Gaunt in that part in Revelation of the Daleks is a masterstroke. He was known as a sitcom guy. So I don't mind bold casting in Doctor Who because it's a bold show. I don't mind casting that seems like, oh, hang on, that's come out of nowhere. That's a bit, and some that I would object to at the time, and maybe they did send out the wrong message at the time because Doctor Who didn't have the best reputation. But no, Marcus Gilbert's very good. He gives very convincing night. Yeah, It's I mean, this is. I seem to recall one of the newspapers being cross that the episode ending was, "Oh, I don't believe it." The episode ends with saying, "Kill them now." Now I have got to think and not just keep, because I have to talk and think at the same time doing this. But I think I've really let myself down on some of the choices because I've overlooked something that I really liked and in desperation picked something fleeting and trivial. What is my favourite thing about episode 1? I hope you're enjoying this, by the way. Welcome to my house. Matthew Purvis, assistant floor manager, is the son of Peter Purvis. Ian Dow, the OB lighting guy, he loved working with Sylvester and Sophie. They're very well liked people, Sylvester and Sophie. And Scott Talbot, who does studio sound, if you ever see him on the on any of the documentaries, he looks about, he's never aged. Right, well, okay, we'll get to the end of the episode, and I will. Do I pause? Yes, because Mike. I need to talk about Michael Kerrigan, the director. Well, look, that means my tea's probably gone cold. I hope my tea goes cold when I do the rescue, because that's on the planet Dido. Save that joke for the appropriate story, Toby. Okay. That sort of gold might never occur to me again. I've half an idea that this camera hasn't picked me up at all. Right, so my favourite thing, I've lined up John's favourite thing. My favourite thing about episode 1 is, I think I like the concept of knights in armour juxtaposed with current military hardware. It's very, that idea, the whole, because it's not just a clash of that wonderful Doctor Who thing of the ancient and the modern, but it's about modern weaponry and nuclear weapons and knights are associated with chivalry and honour and all that sort of thing, and the way that we sometimes dress up war, which is actually generally killing people. So it's a lot more than just a surface thing. So yeah, hoiking some ancient knights and juxtaposing them with the current military and a nuclear missile on a lake, and the idea of knights with laser guns, I do, although I don't like the sparks, is neat, because that means all of that, the swords of their sorcery, the swords of their are sort of ceremonial, and all the sword fighting is to do with the proper way of doing things, which I think is, it makes for good, exciting sword fights, but it's also again a sort of comment on, yes, we do things a certain way, although what we're doing is butchery. So knights in the 20th century is my favourite thing about episode, and I like the screaming music that goes with them as well when he rises up out of the hill, and it's got that screaming music theme. Yeah. So that was a lot of things, wasn't it? Don't care. Right, what did Jon say?
Hi again, everyone.
Hi, Jon.
Hello, Toby. So I've decamped to the beer garden of the Gorkrow Hotel to tell you 5 of my favourite things about Battlefield. And it's been hard because I have a lot of favourite things about Battlefield. But the first choice is one that I think is deeply uncontroversial, and that is the return of Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier. Obviously, this is his last on-screen story, certainly in the main show. I choose to ignore that Cyberman thing that happened. But I think he's wonderful here. I think he's given lots to do in the story, which is great. And I really like how his dry, sort of understated acting style contrasts with some of the, shall we say, larger-than-life acting going on from other cast members. I love his interplay with Doris and with Lavelle. They make a nice short-lived double act. I also think he gets all the best lines in this script. I think my favourite is just between you and me, Mordred. I'm getting a little tired of hearing about your mother. And of course, get off my world, which I think sums up the Brigadier's attitude to most alien life pretty well. Yeah, I think this is a fitting final story for the Brigadier. I think it's lovely.
Yeah, good choice, Jon. And of course, a canny choice, because I'm bound to have chosen the Brigadier at some point, but now I can't, because he's chosen him for episode 1. So that's quite good, because it forces my hand, because it stops me being unimaginative. And also, for those that maybe not seen all this, I'm going to try and resist going, that bit that actor does, or something that's tight, because I think that's quite boring of me, because I talk about actors and bits that actors do, or the fact I know a fact about an actor all the time. So I'm just trying to be more interesting. I'm trying to be interesting. And if I'm failing, I'm sorry. But if you're still watching, it's your fault. I've still got tea on my knee. I thoroughly enjoyed Rattling. That rattled through. That's what I really like about that. We think sometimes of sort of old telly, and that is now 31 years old. That's terrifying, of being a bit pedestrian. There's a real rattly pace to that, and the much maligned Kev McCulloch is responsible for a lot of that, I have to say. And yeah, there are bits that didn't work, but we're not here to talk about those. So I'm not even going to do that, because you can go anywhere on the internet to find people banging on about the bits that didn't work. So let's put a bomb under those. Let's make them go boom. I'm going to watch episode 2 right now. We're going to go with episode 2. Press play now. I don't know how many times I press play then. Now, I've got my pen and paper, because I didn't write down anything last time. And because I'm so addled, unlike the fresh-faced 15-year-old who watched this when it first went out, there's a lot of water under the bridge. I do like the TARDIS in the bubble. this was the most sophisticated thing ever when I was a kid. This title sequence when it first began, but maybe talk about that when we do Time and the Rani. Oh, there'll be a lot to talk about when we talk about Time and the Rani. Battlefield. Ben Aronovich, of course, had written Remembrance of the Daleks, which everyone had loved. I love Marcus Gilbert. He totally nails it. He's got that real convincing night acting thing going on, which takes a certain quality of actor, and he's got it. And as I say, it was because he was in the he did shortly after this. He did Riders, which was a sort of with Michael Praed from Robin of Sherwood, a kind of it was a Ginny Cooper thing, wasn't it? Bottoms and posh people shagging, basically. Christopher Bowen had done a bottom thing prior to this, so this is sandwiched between two handsome men's bottoms in terms of their TV career. But as I say, Marcus Gilbert was then around because he was in the third Army of Darkness, the third Evil Dead film, playing I Saw a Knight. And then he was in the Gold Blend advert. He was the sort of the second generation of Anthony Head. So, I love the fact that because I didn't know Marcus Gilbert at all prior to this, and I don't think he was mentioned in the publicity material all that much, which is a shame because he's great. He's got that slightly sort of bite, that whispered he's chivalric, but he's got that he's a fighter as well. But and Merlin as the Doctor. Now, I'd seen Excalibur, but I was largely distracted. That's got lots of bottoms in it too. It's a very bottomy podcast. I do like the way Sylvester McCoy says that. I don't know if it's the effect he's going for, but more Anslin's there going, remember Baden and his mighty arts. He's being very serious about it, and then the Doctor says it as if he's saying, yeah, and I've got a nice Hoover. He's sort of but he does it in a sort of doctorish way, which it sort of undermines all the. All this sort of medieval posturing, the way he sort of talks about mighty arts as if they're just a thing he's got in his bag. Yes, I must try and get to grips with Xiao Yung, who I seem to recall doesn't do all that much. But again, we'll come to her later. I love Flight Lieutenant Lavelle. I had the privilege of interviewing Dorothée, who sadly died a couple of years ago. I was really shocked by that. She was a very stunning woman, and of course you don't really see. You do see her long hair when she in the next episode, but she was. This is so woke. Which as a good thing. I'm a bit curmudgeonly about some things from the modern era, so I don't know if I would be counted as woke by some. I just want everybody to be happy, but and it's interesting, and actually you don't know. It's only when you look back and think, did we think that? Did those things that progress is all about doing things that seem heretical? And I think even now, well, in fact, I talked about it when I did Turn Left. The idea of a female black officer was enough to get people, calling it all sorts of names after the sun. Well, this is, 20 years prior to that, so should be applauded. And I like the look of these scenes with the light and the crystal balls and. All of that sort of nighty stuff is good. I seem to recall his laughs aren't in sync later on, which spoils it. Which shame, because he looks great, Christopher Bowen, with the long sort of greasy hair is the wrong word, wet hair and the stubble, and he looks, it's a great look. All of that. I do like the fact that these two have had a big old fight. He's so charming. If I was a lady, I would fall for Anselin. This is a good scene with, and the lights go down, don't they? Yeah. I love all of this stuff. I mean, it's just, it's not plot or anything. It's just to get you all excited, and you wonder. I was going to say you wonder where the light's from. No, you don't. It's from the lightning. That's fine. Yeah. Don't get much CSO in those days. What was I talking about? Being woke. No, it's being progressive, and again, you have lots of different nationalities. And some of it might be lip service or nods to progressiveness, but that's right. Sometimes a nod is better than no acknowledgement at all. That was a great shot of Lavelle in the Brigadier and him asleep and her being amused. There's a lot of lovely interplay between the two of them that is, I think, above and beyond the call of duty for what they have to contribute to the story. I love all of this, and I like this piece of music. I love this lighting. But poor old Christopher. Say to any actor, just stand there and the Brigadier's eyes open here, don't they? Yeah, that's great. This is all great. And it's dark and it's nighttime. Nighttime is not in Doctor Who as often as we think it should be. Oh, night has fallen here. Don't they have that? Yeah. Poor Christopher Bowen. What? Why are you laughing? You bet he's going, oh, please, can I stop? No, need a bit more. He's got to do a quick pan in onto you. What am I laughing at? You're bad. You're a baddie who's happy. Oh, God, all right. Love you. Don't tell the kids to watch Doctor Who. I have to do a really stupid bit. I quite like the Doctor Who set in a pub as well. That was on the trailer. If not the trailer, the coming soon tonight. He's still blooming going, isn't he? He's and they've had to dub him on afterwards. I'm sorry, man. Well, I'm not criticising you. I don't think you should. And he's very handsome too, isn't he? He looks great. That's a brilliant shot. The Doctor going out of focus and Anselin with all his gravitas rising up behind him. I love that shot. That's Jean Marsh off of The Crusade and the Dalek Master Plan, and practically every film that needed a witch at around this time. It was almost, I remember sort of going a bit, because I love the idea of Jean Marsh off of Doctor Who being in Doctor Who, but part of me was like, but she's already been in Doctor Who. We could have had another famous actress, and she's done loads of witches, but and of course she'd been a companion, so it's a bit like, I don't really consider Sarah Kingdom a companion, to be honest, but don't write in. But I suppose it was like a regular coming back. But I remember being quite cross that she's higher than Nicholas Courtney in the credits, because he is a regular. He's second lead in season 8. So, and when one of the Doctors comes back, when Patrick Troughton comes back, he gets second billing before Nicola Bryant because he's the Doctor. So I figured somebody who's a former companion, that's a great shot as well, the sun rising up. And that scream at the end as the lights go down, that's all really nice stuff. Although, the cold light of day on videotape is not... That would be so much more atmospheric on film, wouldn't it? The sort of the dawn, the dawn. I do like the Doctor tidying up the garden. Oh, and I like the way that these two wake up alert, yes. Anselin and Bambera asleep... resting on each other, and the fact that when wakes them up. They stand alert. I rather like that. But yeah, it would have looked amazing on film, wouldn't it? That dawn. But yes, the Brigadier, I felt should have felt. But a helicopter was big news. In fact, I remember one of the newspapers at the time going, "Oh, yeah, they've thrown a lot of money at this. He's got a helicopter." Never occurred to me a helicopter would be an expensive thing. Yeah, she's great, Dorota Ray, as Flight Lieutenant Lavelle. Obviously, she's not really a helicopter pilot. Yeah, okay, funky music. Yep. Why? I wonder why I was so cross with this at the time. I was just cross. I was 15. I've got a 16-year-old now. He's cross. No matter how you try to stop them being cross, they get cross with you. I suppose Doctor Who was a bit. My dad wasn't around, so Doctor Who. My mum was busy. Doctor Who was a bit like my parent. When you get cross with your parent, don't you? And the things it does to try and impress you, you go, oh, you get fed up with what are you trying to do? That's rubbish, Dad. But it also makes you feel cosy and comfortable and safe. Doctor Who is my dad. That's a terrible old cliche, isn't it? But it's sort of true. It's fulfilled an educational, a comforting, a constancy of a role in my life. That's great. And it is extraordinary you wouldn't be allowed a companion that was an arsonist, juvenile delinquent who blew things up these days. I don't think. I didn't really think much about it at that time, and I didn't like the Nitro 9 cans. They didn't look like deodorant cans to me. They look more like thermos flasks. It's amazing what things spoil things for you. A great line. Only when I'm drunk, sir. I love these two. I want a series with Flight Lieutenant Lavelle and the Brigadier. Call me a line lady, but break your nose. Yeah, I like see that. There's in fact because we laud Robert Holmes's double acts. There's when you haven't got much money and you've got to fill 4 episodes, you tell the story through characters and through character interaction, and I'm enjoying being with all of these characters. Oh yeah, because of course she destroys the. Now this is directed by Michael Kerrigan, who at around this time he was sort of completing a jigsaw puzzle because he and Andrew Morgan had directed a thing called Knights of God. So it seemed quite sensible that with Morgan not directing this series, the other Knights of God director. And Knights of God was something that I rather enjoyed. That had, knights with machine guns, and is a sort of, and Patrick Troughton was in it, and Gareth Thomas was in it, and John Woodvine. So lots of Who type people, Nigel Stock, but it had been sort of delayed, and it got. And I remember when I caught it, thoroughly enjoying it. But if I watched something that was on the other side, because it was ITV, that was sort of sci-fi-y, even though I wasn't one of the houses where the ratings were registered, I felt like I was betraying Doctor Who, and I shouldn't be helping out the competition. So and that stretched for so long. I mean, it took me ages to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer because I somehow didn't want to acknowledge that I might like that, because that would come at the expense of Doctor Who. It's like you can only like one thing. It's a peculiar. Well, being a Doctor Who fan's quite peculiar. Yes, okay, but that sort of loyalty that we have to the show, that I sort of, and I videoed this, and I was didn't have much money, so I didn't buy as good videotapes as I would have liked to have bought. And I remember there was a slight flicker at the top, and I remember thinking, oh God, but what if what if something happens? Is this is the only copy left? It's got to be as good quality as possible. Because again, you harboured that fantasy. That's why you had to record everything to do with Doctor Who because Doctor Who had gone missing in the past. And what if yours was the last? I don't know what sort of Armageddon or apocalypse is going to happen, or what sort of miscreants would go around destroying all of Doctor Who, apart from my copies. I did live in the middle of nowhere, so they would have struggled. But I don't know under what circumstances. I thought mine would, but I remember, I used to ache with worry about those little flickers of videotape that I'd somehow destroyed history. Gosh, it's a minefield liking a thing and being young, and well, it doesn't actually get easier when you get any older. My heart still fluctuates over unimportant things. You're enjoying. Now this is neat. I didn't really understand this at the time, and I don't like it when baddies fall out with each other. I always get annoyed in 24 when a new baddie comes in and kills the baddie who's been in the previous episodes because they're bored of that baddie and they need a new baddie. It feels like you're doing the hero's job for him if the baddies out turn on each other. But this is really interesting because they're mother and son. As I say, I didn't quite understand this when I was younger, and it seems so obvious now. That's a great shot, but yeah, the idea that he's desecrated the war dead and that they're on in a civilized place, and then you have to acknowledge that gives nice depth, and it ties in with that chivalry thing. And this is rather fun that she goes, "Oh, all right, mate. Yeah, you're one of my lot. We're not having a fight now." But Battle Queen of the Sraks. Yeah. It's quite an introduction. I have to admit, I wasn't wild about Gene Marsh's performance at the time. I like the fact he does lecture them in archaeology. And that's a great shot as well. So it's actually I'd remember not liking Gene Marsh particularly, finding him a bit arch-witchy, and not being wild about Michael Kerrigan's direction. But I'm certainly liking the way he's composed some of his shots, and again the pace that he gives to it. And I like the smoke. I'm not wild about the green light in this set as it opens out at the end of the episode, but we're not there yet. But Michael Kerrigan, Andrew Morgan, because Michael Kerrigan came back and directed for the Sarah Jane Adventures. Amazing that he's one of those ones that sort of straddled. Nobody really talks about that much. That he, and then he's on the DVD for Battlefield. I never saw him interviewed about Sarah Jane, and then he died. Again, relatively young, but Andrew Morgan told me that he never slept. He had this weird constitution whereby, he would work all day and then sort of go out and carouse and then come back to work seemingly unaffected. So interesting character, but I don't know much about him apart from that, and that he directed this one story, which is weird to think because he's a relative, he's relatively recent in Doctor Who's history. The fact that I know, this is 31 years ago, I still think of this as quite new Doctor Who because it was on when I was, looking back at historical Doctor Who, which was old and fusty and black and white. Now this is the Knight Commander. Here is Stefan Schwartz. Forgive me if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Who directed the episode of The Boys I watched the other night. He has directed loads of massive American television shows. And yet he's playing, a very lowly part in this. He's had an amazing career as a director. But yeah, I was watching The Boys last... Oh, it's The Boys tonight. Sorry, I'm watching... I thought I should be watching The Boys now, and I'm watching Battlefield for you. And I'm enjoying almost every minute of it. I think you'd cut to the chase a bit more now. I think you'd be in there, but these two have such a great rapport that it's very nice. But I'm commandeering. Yeah, I love these commandeers of 2CV. That hadn't occurred to me at the time as being anything. I just thought, oh, it's a bit, it's a bit low budget. It's a bit, but actually, the fact that he commandeers a 2CV is glorious. That's the best car he could have commandeered. Yeah, I don't think the model really works under the water. Yeah, storytelling's not always clear, but that's making videotape, largely videotape, studio-bound multi-camera. This set's actually pretty good. For some reason, again, at the time, I wasn't wild about it. I think I might just not have liked the green. I think maybe I sometimes think of green as a bit of a lazy colour with sci-fi. Oh dear. She's deserved some. Paintbox was huge at the time. It was like CGI with crayons. And had been sort of trademarked by the Chronicles of Narnia. That's where it really, and that looks like a sort of picture book now, that show. But this was, it was state of the art. This was these worms. Actually, they look okay. I thought they would look terrible. But actually, they look all right. They look okay. That's good because the camera did look like it hit him. It's not a dead end. It's a cupboard. You've walked into a cupboard and said, "Doctor, it's a dead end," and then stood there waiting for the door to. That's not Sophie Aldred's fault. That is the difficulties of staging a drama on a set in a multi-camera, blah de blah de blah. Especially a deadly set where the glass breaks and the actress nearly dies. But you need to watch the DVD documentary for that. That's the bit I love. That the way it hits him in the face. It really looks like it got his teeth then. Yeah, of course that was very, very dangerous to Sophie Aldred there. That scene, but the way she got trapped in the dead end, she tried very hard, Sophie Aldred, then, but it was the staging of that was tricky. But other things were better. The direction much better than I remembered. I didn't mind the old green worms, and I love Flight Lieutenant Lavelle. Now, Jon chose the fact that the Brigadier was back in it, and he did mention his encompassing his joy that the Brigadier was back, his rapport with Lavelle. So does that mean I'm not allowed that? No, I think I am allowed that, because his thing was the fact that the Brigadier's in it and the Brigadier being back and Nicholas Courtney being Brigadier. I would like to highlight, but that means he's not going to choose it for this, and I'm going to try and because I've got to try and I've got to try and guess. Of course, remind myself of the rules of my own podcast. I've got to try and guess what Jon will guess, and he's not going to choose Lavelle and the Brigadier, because that's already part of his answer. So left to my own devices, I'd have chosen Lavelle and the Brigadier and her Only When I'm Drunk. I like that. And actually, that's all I've written down. But in saying that out loud, I realise I've got to choose something else because that's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to choose It's Just a Shot. There's lots of lovely bits in that. I'm not struggling, but I really like that bit where the Doctor's in focus and then Anselin comes up behind him and goes, "She is coming." The Doctor goes out of focus and it throws focus onto Anselin. Not only because it's a neat shot, but it's actually what it does is it really sells the impact of what's happening, and it's the delivery of the line and everything as well. So that bit, I bet he hasn't chosen that, but it's because I'd given my heart to Flight Lieutenant Lavelle, and it's just And then I realised she was already cheating on me with Jon. So what has Jon chosen for episode 2?
So my second choice of something that I love about Battlefield is another character, but this time it is a new character, and it is Peter Wormsley, the archaeologist, as played rather marvellously by James Ellis.
Jimmy Ellis.
I think he's the perfect picture of that slightly irritable, obsessive, eccentric, and you can tell that James Ellis is, he's a proper character actor, and he gives a very nice, nuanced performance, even though he's not given that much to do. The highlight for me is when he's stalling Brigadier Bambera by quoting Tennyson at her, which I think that's a tactic we can all learn from. I think it's a shame that he only really gets to appear in a couple of episodes before he's dispatched by unit, evacuated. But I'd like to think that in some alternate universe, Big Finish made a series of Peter Wormsley audio dramas where he gets up to all kinds of archaeological escapades. I'd listen to them.
Oh, no, you see, I nearly chose the bit where he lectures them in archaeology. Why didn't I choose that? Why didn't I choose quite a big bit instead of one shot? I'm useless at this. I as soon as I choose what I choose and then hear from somebody else, I regret it. Life is full of regrets, and I conjure my own new regrets on a daily basis. Isn't that life? Conjuring regrets. Which is why I'm trying to do a positive thing, and even that is causing me regrets. Oh well, it's not important, and I'm pleased that James Ellis got a mention because he is lovely. He does do it well. He was known to us because he did a series called One by One, which was about a zoo vet that he played an Irish zookeeper called Paddy Riley. But I remember when he was in that, my mum go, "Oh well, it's James Ellis," because he was in Z Cars for years and years and years as Bert Lynch. It was famously quite often late for rehearsals, Jimmy Ellis, when he was in Z Cars. I should be doing all of this sort of stuff over the episode. Sorry. Yeah, I've got no points. I hope there's not some sort of fine at the end of this podcast, because I've set up a format whereby it's virtually impossible for me to win, especially if I choose such stupid arbitrary things. Okay, well, I'm going to watch The Boys now. I'd forgotten I'm recording this on a Friday night. That might be directed by the Knight Commander, who I've just seen in that. If he's directing this episode as well. Wow, talk about, reaching for the stars. Good for him. Well, it's the first cosplayed episode of Happy Times and Places. It's Battlefield episode 3. Press play now. Well, look, I realised, sorry for those of you who are just listening, not watching, you can see this on the video at no extra cost. I realised I'd got the Brigadier's cardigan when I was watching episode 1, so I've decided I've never done cosplay in my life, not my thing. I mean, I've got the hat and scarf, had the hat and scarf, but that's not quite the same. I never went for the whole thing. Never tried to get the right waistcoat or trousers or anything, like the silhouette. But I've decided, because it is within my means, I've got a solo moustache, and I've got an approximation of the Brigadier's gardening outfit. And he gardens in a cravat. Gotta love that. So this is a very special episode, Battlefield episode 3 in cosplay. It's funny, I was reading something about a Doctor Who fan with a big collection in a newspaper website, and the comments underneath, somebody going, "Oh, virgin," so unkind. And but I've never got to cosplay. It's not my thing. I've quite enjoyed today. I've been experimental with facial hair in lockdown anyway. I had a handlebar moustache in an attempt to see what I'd look like if I was a season 3 guest star in Prison Break or something, or somebody who would kidnap Jack Bauer about 3/4 of the way into into a season of 24 with the handlebar moustache. But I've quite enjoyed it, and it's funny why we would mock. Because as I said, I've never quite got cosplay, but I think it's marvellous that it's anything that shows application, dedication, creativity, anything that Doctor Who does that spawns that, I think is to be applauded. Anything that stops us being passive viewers. With me, it's finding out about actors and things like that, and what went on behind the scenes. Other people, it's creative expression through, and honing a skill. Creating the costumes, making them, sourcing them. It's great. Anything that isn't passive, yet people mock it, don't they? And I think it's fear. People have a fear of people expressing creativity, because I think deep down we'd all like to, but we worry about the embarrassment. I love this bit. I love Julia, and of course you could see the cracks in. Slightly slowed down, this, isn't it? But it's all right. It's a great image. Sophie Aldred is so game. She's always jumping in water, and when she does things with explosions, throws herself about. I don't think we could have wished for a more dedicated performer. And again, when you're doing something that often relies on the actors, to have somebody that's prepared to do anything is great. But you could see the crack in the glass, couldn't you? And that was actually footage of her being rescued that they used in the footage of the actual episode. I like the way that Marcus Gilbert does this. Yeah, you're doing exactly what is required of you, you handsome devil. And tapeworm, I don't like that tapeworm, just because it's a pretty grotesque image. Sylvester McCoy also throws himself about, and is again another very, very committed performer. And what a face! He looks like Doctor Who, doesn't he? It's that brilliant synthesis of the sort of the clown-like physiognomy, but also a sort of bird-like sadness, a melancholy. Although he's the most clownish of all the Doctors, he's also at times the saddest looking, and it's a great combination. And here they are, the Brigadier and the Doctor. Who I am cosplay. I've even. I wish he said them. I wish he pronounced Lethbridge. I don't know. I wish he'd pronounced the name right. He doesn't quite mispronounce it. He just doesn't do it very well. This is great. June Bland does a very good job here. June Bland, by the way, is her grandson, Jordan Brooks, who's a fantastic comedian. Very interesting, very offbeat, plays with the rules, very funny. Is currently the longest holder of the Edinburgh Comedy Award, because there hasn't been an Edinburgh Festival this year. It's awarded every year. You don't hold it, as it were, you just get it every year. But because there hasn't been an Edinburgh Fringe this year, he's the current holder for 2 years running, which has never happened before. So it runs in the family, and he's definitely worth checking out. Jordan Brooks, fine comic. Seek out those who hold Excalibur, and then go and direct an episode of The Boys and all the other American shows that you do, you clever knight commander. He didn't, by the way, direct the episode of The Boys that I watched after episode 2. Yes, that's it, guys. March, but in a way that suggests there's a camera there. Doesn't matter. I think that's fine. That doesn't look like bitter. It's the right colour, not enough head. I like these two characters. They bring a welcome sort of realism. Pat and his wife. And I like his joke. Yeah, you ugly git. So Mordred's drunk and laughing at his own joke. Oh, Lavelle, who, of course, I hadn't realised is French, but director is Serbian, I think. And I remember when I interviewed her, she said, of course I put on the French accent. And I said, well, did you? Oh, okay. It never occurred to me that Lavelle was French, but of course she is. But I think the accent just goes under standard foreign, doesn't it? Which was allowable in those days. Nowadays, you'd get a French actor. Interesting, probably. Our casting of international actors has become a lot easier as actors travel. Doctor Who's had Americans in it, and now if we need, although she ended up being based in Australia, Dorota Ray. I'm sad about Lavelle, but this is very clever, complex stuff because they need the information. So she's a soldier, she's expendable, and they sort of get it in a painless way. But they also, and she does that good joke about you can get the tab if you like, so it comes from her. But they also, and she treats her with sort of great dignity, which is rather touching. And of course the Rowlandsons are absolutely appalled because somebody's just been murdered in their pub. And so we have this rather sick joke that she says, he says you can't leave her like that because it's unpleasant and uncivilized. So she turns her into a hooverable package, and she gets the tab by returning her sight to her, which is very interesting. Because it shows a different sort of moral code. We've just seen this couple kill people, but then, deliver somebody her sight back. Although that's quite a complex issue that I'm not going to get into now. I say, oh yes, I'd like to, because the idea that somebody who's disabled considers that they are missing something because they don't have something that a non-disabled person would have is quite a complex and grey area, as are most things with nuance, which is lost from a lot of today's discourse, which is why I'd like to actually rescind my statement from a previous episode where I said I'm not particularly woke. I think I am quite woke. I agree with all the things that woke people agree with. I'm the very embodiment of a weedy liberal. But I'm concerned. I worry about how the liberal cause is actually harmed by the conduct and lack of nuance of some of the most self-proclaimed of the woke brigade. So I would say I am woke, but I'm woke in a cardigan, shall we say? Ha 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 ha. But I just hope everybody's happy, and I don't want to row. And also, I respect that other people have come to different conclusions from me about how to make the world better, and I don't necessarily think they're evil. That's quite old-fashioned these days. But I'm eating a naked bar, so it's a good sequence. Although it's quite tastefully done because there's a bit of machine and gunning to death that goes on shortly. There's great, great blowing out the back of the back window. Now I've got to remember to write down so I don't pick something rubbish. I like the paying of the tab. I think that's very good. And even Lavelle, only in her one scene this week, did a really good job. But I can't really choose her, I don't think, because she was part of what Jon chose in an earlier episode. This is pretty grim, this bit, although it's sort of comedy banter. She does, when she sticks her head up through the roof, we don't see what's on the other end of her machine gun, but it's but I like Brigadier Bambera. She's a great character, and she plays it very. And I do like her rapport with. And of course we can see the Doctor's leg sticking out the car window, which is terrific. Yeah, tell them they're in trouble. Yeah, so because Sylvester is so sort of gay. I wish these guns were level. If you had time to do that again, you would. Oh yeah, not very well observed. This, yeah, that's a bit like the bus in Delta and the Bannermen, where you don't quite get the impression of an explosion. And I don't really like the Brigadier's reaction here, but I suppose he is a soldier, and that's what we're supposed to think. But oh, hello, Xiao Yung. I still don't know what you're... Because Xiao Yung, of course, Ling Tai plays Xiao Yung, was an extra in Warriors of the Deep. She's one of the sea base crew. And again, we like the Rowlinsons here, but then we get the impression that Pat going, "Oh, you're not English, are you?" You go, "Oh, you're a nice, friendly landlord, but actually you're probably a bit of a racist," which is again just a nice, because you can get very nice, polite people who turn out to have slightly dodgy attitudes. It's what Doctor. I mean, I'm not a great fan of the umbrella, but stopping the Major saluting by hooking it down is a lovely bit of Doctor business. It's a shame that Peter Walmsley is going to go now, because I expected James Ellis to at least last the 4 episodes, but his job is done, which is and then he worked with me shortly after this, which I'm sure was a great compensation for not making it to episode 4. And he was a lovely guy. I remember there was what can only be described as a media word beginning with W and rhyming with tanker. And Major Husak, nice bit of business there. Sadly, that actor Paul Tomani, who played Major Husak, was dead within about 5 years. I think he died 3 or 4 years after this, at the age of mid-30s, which is tragic. I know nothing more about how or why. But yeah, and anyway, there was some. There were few of them then. There are lots of them now. People who who carry about them a lot of confidence, which is in direct inverse ratio between how much use they are and likable and what they bring to the table. You encounter more of them these days, and I don't know what this guy was doing there. This besuited, sunglassed moron. And anyway, he'd annoyed everybody, I think. And when the cast all got together in the afternoon, I was struggling to get a ticket for my sister. And Jimmy basically went, "I don't know why we're spending all our time, what we're having to do for this guy." He didn't say it when the guy was there. He said, "And this young lad can't even get a ticket for his sister, so can we sort our priorities out?" And he was basically, as the leading man, cutting through a lot of the crap and also sticking up for me, and in a slightly related but aspect of what the production's priorities were, which he needn't have done, and he didn't do it in a bullish way either. But he just made sure it happened. Proper leading man. Good for him. Good for Jimmy. Nice fella. A real twinkle. Came round to our house and used the phrase "confirmed bachelor" about somebody with a twinkle in his eye, which I've always remembered. Very lovely. He was a confirmed bachelor, he said about this fellow. I can't remember the circumstances. Good sword fighting. I do like a sword fight. It's Alf Joint who did the fights, didn't he? Oh, there's a fly on top of her head there. Good old Ansel Lynn. You wish to run away. Yes, I'm liking this. This art thou betrothed. I mean, Doctor Who was not popular at this time, so I always got annoyed with it when it did things I thought could turn off the general public, whoever they were. But it didn't feel like it was a show that was watched by the general public at the time. And indeed, of course, this is the last season. So I could never quite relax and take it on its own terms. I mean, I still think there are mistakes. I think the question marks all over the place. It's been said before about how you can't show how enigmatic you are by emphasizing your enigmatic nature. It's like you can't, eccentricity should be organic rather than grafted on or draw attention to itself. And this was that bit was on the trailer. Do I like that? I didn't like it as a kid. Do I like it now? Don't mind it. It's fine. I have no opinion. I love her crystal ball because she makes it fly away, doesn't she? At one point, which is very niftily and simply done. Yeah, she gonna zing it away now. But yeah, Shao Yung doesn't do much apart from have someone for Ace to get nearly racist at when they're stuck in the circle. But again, in terms of representation, in 1989, I think this has laudable intent. And I know accusations are thrown around about people being tokenistic or whatever. I think if you see somebody with a different skin colour from you as a token, then I think that's the reason that we need more faces and representation of colour on the screen, because if it's still seen as abnormal to you, then you're not. Then that's the issue that needs redressing. And I'd say the same about disability. In fact, more so. Representation of disability is terrifyingly bad. In the arts, actually, it has a lower representation than in most other workplaces, which is extraordinary, seeing as the arts are supposed to be so progressive. And it's interesting how often some of the most progressive people have an ironically blind spot when it comes to disability. They'll be furious about representation of ethnicity or in other areas, and not be so worried about disability. Anyway, that's just something because it's close to home for me. They're horrible to each other, these two, in their circle. It's very simple, isn't it? Very simple effect. It sort of comes out of nowhere, the fact that these two start rowing with each other, but it's doing a very good thing. It's showing that they're under psychological pressure and having games played with them, and of course being tried to if they go out of the circle, they're in trouble. So that hug is lovely, and the fact that they realise that there's a certain sort of manipulation going on, and they have to be kind to each other. Yes. And yes, a bit of an explosion like that. It's a shame it cuts when the guy's actually got back up again. That's but there is a guy who flies through the air, isn't there? I think bazookaing a guard because while he's fighting one of your own guys is a bit friendly fire there. Yeah, but that's a very decent battle scene, and all this smoke and Mordred. Oh yeah, these two look great. I thought Christopher Bones. Haven't I laughed enough? But they look great, these two. and knights fighting in front of a crashed nuclear missile convoy is great stuff. Yeah. Oh, I like that bit where you hold the sword in front of your nose. Yeah, this is the Doctor. Will be. Yeah, well, he's given it his best shot. I was quite yelled and furious. The Destroyer. Oh, you've got to love the Destroyer. And I don't think we'd seen pictures of the Destroyer, so we didn't know what he was going to look like. I love all this dark lighting. It's great. This is really spooky. That's a great shot of Ace and Xiao Yung in the moonlight and Morgaine over them. This is quite spooky. Witches are hard to do, aren't they? Because they become almost a sort of cliche. To the Destroyer. But she looks great. She's got a great face, Jean Marsh. And look at that's a great mask. And the colour for monsters is now blue, not green. And all the better for it. I think it would have been so easy to make him a green dragon, and a blue dragon just makes him seem a little bit different. Right. What did I like best in that? I think it's going to be, I've written it down, I think it's, Brigadier. Oh, Peter Walmsley as well. There's an actor called Peter Walmsley in Mordred Undead who plays one of the two mutants. So I wonder if there's a... Oh, Lavelle's not... She's really low on the credits. That's not fair. So I wonder if that's a coincidence or whether he was a mate of John Nathan Turner or something. Because I don't think he was called Peter Walmsley in the original draft. I think he was called Warmington. Might be wrong. Anyway, I noticed the similarity. So, what's my friend John going to choose? Well, let's press pause and see if he has chosen. I'm choosing the paying of the tab. And that whole pub scene, the Lavelle, because I like to give Lavelle a bit of a credit. Her saying get the tab, and that then feeding into the, her treatment at the hands of Morgaine, and then the paying of the tab, and the tab being alive. So that whole pub scene, even though I'm annoyed that Lavelle died and slightly sad, and I didn't like her being turned into Hoover fodder. Right.
My third choice of something I love about Battlefield is its use of Arthurian mythology, which I think is quite surprising that Doctor Who had been going 26 years at this point and hadn't really explored that at all, considering it's such a key part of British mythology. And I guess some people would argue that this is not the best best vehicle for it, but I really like how it's worked in. I love the use of characters, obviously Mordred and Morgaine, both excellently played. I really like the idea that the Doctor might be Merlin in some alternate future past. I like when Doctor Who just sort of hints at things or suggests things, but we never hear from it again. Like it's just this might be a thing. So feel free to use your imagination. I think that always works really well. And I also like it when the show does sort of play with ideas of mythology and folklore and works them into a sci-fi setting. Yeah, it's great. And obviously Ace emerging from the lake holding a sword. I think that's an iconic Doctor Who moment, right? And a lovely nod to Arthurian myth. And we also get little snatches of Mallory and Tennyson, as previously mentioned, which I love.
Thanks, John. Good point. Well, we didn't choose the same thing. But that's okay. So, I was going to stay up and watch the next episode, but I think this is going to be the lone, for now, cosplayed episode of Happy Times and Places. Battlefield, Part 4. Press play. Then I'd go back, but it's pointless because there seems to be a different gap every time. Now, this is a challenge, everybody, more than usual. I've been quite enjoying Battlefield. Odd, I hated it when I was younger. I think there's a lesson there. The distance. You see in the present when Battlefield was on, Doctor Who was hanging by a thread. Anything that happened could potentially spell the end of the show that I loved and my lifeline. It was what I held on to negotiate my difficult teenage years so that I could emerge from them and become an adult when everything became sorted. Ha ha ha! And now it's midnight, I can't sleep, I'm in lockdown. Looks like we're going to have another 6 months of lockdown. I'm largely unemployable. Interesting, I've had a very interesting few days having a back and forth with a director I hugely admire, nothing to do with Doctor Who, and texting my son and feeling like part of something, but it's not going to lead to any work. It's not actually about any of the stuff I do, that I consider my living. But I do sort of think, but at least, I can say, oh yeah, I know that person, or I've done a thing. It's just like I'm accruing an increasingly poor currency for what will I look back on my life and it'll just be a series of encounters and anecdotes. And that's not entirely unrelated to this, because this is Nicholas Courtney's last appearance in Doctor Who, and the Brigadier was very much my favourite character and favourite companion. So I was always delighted when he came back, and I did encounter him at conventions and at commentaries, and ended up living not far from him. In fact, when I went to his funeral, the post-funeral hospitality was done at Nick's favourite Chinese restaurant, which was literally 3 minutes from where I lived. I'd had a chance to go for drinks with him a few times in Crouch End, but I was working a lot and commuting from Manchester to London and doing all of those things. And you think now, would I have given up a gig for a evening in a pub with the Brig? There he is. Try me. See, we have to forget. This is what this story does very well, and I don't like it, but it's probably right that I shouldn't like it, is that the Brigadier is steeped in blood. He is a convenience for the Doctor. I've done Day of the Daleks for this, and I really don't like the bit where the Doctor kills the Ogrons. But of course, the Brigadier comes and machine guns the one that the Doctor doesn't kill. And as somebody of slightly peacenicky liberal morality, I do understand the sort of hypocrisy of going, yes, the doctor shouldn't take a life. He's got these guys, though, who can kill whoever they like because the adventure requires lots of the bad guys to get killed, as long as the Doctor doesn't get his hands dirty. And that is a paradox at the core of the show, or at the core of the liberal reading of the show, which is why I'm always quite interested when conservative commentators talk about Doctor Who, because they've equally got a point. It's interesting. Good explosion here, good stunt there. Yeah. Actually, the fight scenes aren't bad here at all, and I do like the sword fighting amidst the the military khaki and traditional sort of gun battles. I'm getting fed up of hearing about your mother. Glorious. It's interesting because obviously this is steeped in Arthurian legend, and I'd sort of seen, I'd read bits about the Night Round Table. We used to go on holiday to Cornwall, and I'd seen Excalibur. But obviously, I think that's great. That's such a casually included effect, deployed effect. It's an effect that just. I'm talking about the crystal ball that Morgaine sort of dismisses and flies away. And what's quite nice is having these, villains from sort of folklore, is that relatively simple things like a chalk circle is really powerful against them in the way that a helicopter or whatever isn't. And I quite like that sort of ancient simplicity sometimes wins out over modern technology. The Destroyer! I love the Destroyer. What a terrific mask. Marek Anton, who of course, and my friend at school, Anton Collins, was very pleased with the fact that Marek Anton, there's an actor called Marek Anton, who is of course also in The Curse of Fenrik. He plays Vershinin, one of the Russian soldiers named after characters from Chekhov. And he's quite a handsome boy, but he's great. And there's real character to the Destroyer. And that mask is so good. I like the blue, I like the hair. So, yes, and Jean Marsh, I've had the pleasure of interviewing her as well. She was good fun. But yes, I sometimes, when doing these, as I say, I was sort of texting this very, very famous film director this week because of something I don't really consider part of my job. And it was exciting, but it was... I think because I was brought up in the countryside in the middle of nowhere, as I watched this, in the middle of nowhere, the idea that any person could be a conduit to the sort of starlight, I'm afraid I think that is a contender for the... I'm sorry, Doctor, for the worst delivered line of any Doctor. Yeah, that's okay. There's plenty to love about Sylvester McCoy, but that line isn't one of them. But yes, as I say, being in the country, as I think we all do, we watch this. To me, is a conduit to starlight. That all these people were living the life, and the world that they inhabited, which seemed so far away from mine, seemed like a magical one where it was all anecdotes and being a motley crew and being creative, and that must be the life. And it was the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but and that's why I think when Doctor Who lets us down or whatever, we get rather furious. But as I've got older, I realise there is no pot of gold, and the rainbow keeps reforming further in the distance, and that one is a fool to think one will ever spend that currency, and one should. And I think I've already chosen my best bit from this episode, because there's a philosophy within it, which in this night where I cannot sleep and I'm unemployed and all of these things, it's what we keep coming back to. And look, he's a small part actor. I don't think he's had a line this episode. That's the only time we see his face. He's now an internationally successful film director, because you keep going. You do the best you can. And I was actually saving this one up to do when I think I was a bit more, because some of these stories, somebody will suggest them and I'll just dive in, and I think I should actually have a think about them so that I can place in my head some things I know that I can sort of pepper through so that they will be interesting. But what you've done is you're at my house and we've woken up in the middle of the night. Neither of us can sleep. I've made some Horlicks. It's metaphorical Horlicks because it's tea, but Horlicks just seems more appropriate. And we're sitting on the sofa and I'm bending your ear. You've probably got a bottle of wine. I can't have one, so I'll forgive myself for dribbling on in. I'm a vision in Canary, by the way, for those of you that aren't doing the YouTube version of this, but are doing the podcast. I have Canary kerchief on. She's so... I love it. I do feel sorry for Xiao Yung, but interesting, there's been a survey today about saying that actually BAME performers are on screen to a higher percentage than they're represented in the makeup of the country, but actually are represented much lower in behind the scenes and executive levels. And I think that's fine. I think you have to reset the balance, and if it means we are currently getting more representation, it is about time. And I speak as somebody that's occasionally lost a part because they've looked at and this has been told to me a couple of times, the makeup of the cast and realised that it's all a bit the same, and so they've. So of course they never recast the lead. They always get rid of something. Johnny No Bollocks a bit further down the credits. And if that is something that means that we have a more progressive and reflective and can encourage people from those sectors that might not feel encouraged into the arts, that is an important thing. So when we look back in 20 years and things have sort of I knew they hadn't killed him. It was too anticlimactic a way to kill him here, because of course we were worried that this was that's a great stunt, the last we were going to see of the brig, but that wouldn't be his death scene. But I was in tenterhooks for the whole of this. But And I think the reason I'm not obsessed, but it's worth talking about, is that I've listened to a few podcasts recently where, people have said, in The Bodyguard, the Jed Mercurio series, there was a Chinese bomb disposal expert, and one of the senior police officers was a black woman, and it took me out of the drama. Well, why did it take you out of the drama? It didn't. And I'm not Mr. As I say, I'm not Mr. I'm sometimes quite cynical about, certainly in comedy, where you see somebody who's been going 5 minutes get a job that veterans of 20 years of great skill and experience don't get near, and it's not always to do with comedic skills. So I can be cynical about it, but when somebody's just sort of when a part, as I say, a bomb disposal expert, or in 1917 a Sikh soldier, there were Sikh soldiers, not that many, but it doesn't matter. It's bizarre. I'm not, as I say, I'm not Mr. Woolly Liberal, but it's never taken me out of a drama. I've never thought, why is that person black? I think that's a really peculiar thing. And if it is peculiar to people, if it is not the norm, then the reason it is being done is so that in 20 years it is the norm, and we all wonder what we were so preoccupied and obsessed about. I think it's a bit of a hobby horse with me with this one, because I think I've tied myself in knots trying to say the right thing, which is also a part of the problem with the discourse, is that you get a bit mealy-mouthed because you can get attacked from both sides, and that doesn't help discourse either. I love the bit where the destroyer breaks open his chains, although he does tear some of his own chest hair, which is gonna smart. I do like the relationship with Morgaine and her son. You sort of believe they have a life outside the drama. Ace is one of the bravest companions. It's all of companions, but the gung-ho nature of Ace is very, very likable. And you know that it's sort of matched by the performer, because she's a gutsy performer. I like her outfit too. Is that a conveniently placed bit of corrugated? Oh, is this? It does that brilliant bit, doesn't he? Where he goes, "Is that a spaceship?" I sometimes do that in everyday life if I'm trying to distract somebody. It's never worked, but it amuses me. It's usually a futile effort. I love that. I was so terrified that the Brigadier was going to die. I've just remembered. My friend from school came to watch this with me. I would get girls back. And we were going to watch Doctor Who. My friend from school, Catherine, came and watched this episode at my house in Shropshire. I had totally forgotten about that. And I think I was harbouring the idea of doing a remake. Every time there's a Doctor Who episode on, I wanted to make my own version of it as a film, and I'd type up the scripts. I never actually finished it. And she would have played Morgaine, because she's very good at striking women parts. Many years later, I ended up marrying her. Not married anymore, but it's still a nice story. And how funny that has just occurred to me. It's a Funny old night tonight. I'm having a funny old night, everybody. Going down memory lane. It can be quite emotional. So I'm glad you're here. I bet you're not. I don't know what this podcast is, but I like to think you're with me, even though I can't hear anything you're saying. Well done, the Brigadier. But yes, I just do the best I can. I just try to do the best I can. I know already that's going to be the thing I choose for this episode. Because it's weird. I've read a lot of the great literature. I know it speaks to so many things at so many levels. I've seen many of the great movies. I've struggled to get through some of them. And many have left me going, this is what speaks to me. This is where I get my philosophy. This is where I get my emotion. This is what stirs my nostalgia. I'd love it if I was able to sit and quote Eisenstein movies or, Hardy and Dickens, which, I can sort of vaguely nudge my way through. But no, for whatever reason, and I'm not a simpleton, but for whatever reason, this is what speaks to me. This is what floats my boat. This is what, I hate the phrase, takes me to my happy place, because it's just horrible. For whatever reason, it's this show that I will sometimes wax lyrical about, but its main job, and it is at its best, is when it is purely entertaining. If it's got subtext, that's great. If it's trying to make a point, that's great. But if it needs to be exciting and funny, that's what it needs to be. And if it's not those things, it's not Doctor Who. If it's not those things, it's bad Doctor Who. All the other stuff is gravy, great, but because it's so entrenched in our childhoods, this one in my teenagehood, and as I say, it's unlocked a memory I had forgotten was there, and it actually keeps in touch with our emotions. I don't drink anymore, and I think one of the reasons drinkers drink is to perhaps get in touch with emotions, access emotions that you struggle to actually access. And when you access those emotions through drink, you articulate things you may be denying yourself or keeping inside. Because this is so tied up in my life, it's peculiar. This is what does that now, because I can't get drink and sit maudlin on the sofa and wax lyrical. So instead, I watch something that I watched as a child, that I was furious with as a child. There's so many things I didn't like about Doctor Who because I was worried that it would be taken away from me. Although I spent so much time being furious about it, I think I forgot to enjoy it. There's a lesson there too, which as a 46-year-old man, you realise that you should try and enjoy as much of life as you can, because it starts to fly by, especially in this quarantine where I'm currently talking in October, and last time I looked it was March. That's great. I mean, it's a bit silly, but it's very Doctor Who. It's very Doctor Who, and Sylvester's great at those sorts of moments. And this is a terrific scene coming up, and unusual. We don't. I talked before about the Brigadier and unit being useful for killing the bad guys that the Doctor isn't prepared to kill. Well, here's one of those rare moments where the villainess and her sidekick, in this case her son, aren't killed. It does leave the question of what the hell do you do with a witch? I mean, what is she in Wormwood Scrubs? And Andrew Cartmell's thing about bringing down the government is the script editor wanting the show to tackle the issues of the day, I think is laudable, and I don't think it's too heavy-handed. There are occasional bits that are quite naive sometimes, I think, in the odd bit of dialogue here and there. Not in this story. but that's being very picky. I think the idea behind it and the way it is generally deployed is great. And as a however old I was, 15-year-old, the idea that Doctor was taking on the ideas of nuclear disarmament and talking about those things, it made me feel inspired. It made me feel that something was on my side. My show was talking to me. And of course, that there is the alternative reading of Doctor Who is that Doctor Who sees what is bad and he stamps it out. So it is multi-layered texturally, but it's mostly about explosions and aliens. But I can't just keep saying I like that explosion and that alien, because this would get tedious fairly quickly if it hasn't already. And if it has, I'm very sorry. She does this really well. It's actually terribly moving. And again, the idea that, arch enemies can have a sort of connection is very real. But yeah, it's also typical, isn't it? Yeah, you two lovers, you get on well. It's your troops and everybody who die for your honour and all of that sort of thing. Whilst you all meet up at the UN summit and shake hands. Whatever the Doctor does here is never quite explained, but I don't really mind. It's like the Venusian karate aikido, but slightly more mystical. Anything to dilute those question marks with a bit of mystery. And I'm glad Anselin didn't die, and I'm assuming him and Bambera get to. Does he? I suppose he stays. Does he? He's gonna have to ditch the sword. That's a lawn to mow. We're at the Brigadier's house now. Have I got those clothes? I've got a shirt a bit like that. I'm sure I had more cravats, but I can't seem to find them. Didn't I say in episode 1? I wasn't sure I'd known who Angela Douglas was, but of course I knew who she was because of who she was in the Carry-Ons. I think I just hadn't put two and two together. Nice that she's not what I imagined when I imagined Doris. I imagined somebody a bit more earthy. I think I just judged by the name Doris. I hadn't associated with somebody quite so well-to-do. I thought perhaps the Brigadier had more earthy tastes. I do like his house though. So yeah, we've got a bit of a jolly Carry-On ending, and yes, the locking up of Morgaine and Mordred is a thing, and the incidental music goes full sitcom, doesn't it? I really enjoyed that. It was a story that I was not particularly fond of. I would say my least favourite of that season when it was broadcast. I can't see me liking any of the subsequent stories from this season any less when I do them for this project. So that stands the latter period of classic Who in good stead. Gosh, I didn't half bang on, and not necessarily about what was on screen there, but that's what Doctor Who does, I think. And I can only spend so many times going, that's an excellent set. I like his performance. So today it was opening up of unsuspected memories, and I thought that was great. Isn't it interesting when the future of the show doesn't rely on what you're watching? You're much more forgiving of it. When something is an historical exhibit, you can enjoy it without any threat whatsoever. So I think that's a lesson to when one isn't enjoying Doctor Who. I see the fury. I see the fury of people for whom Doctor Who is not what they want it to be at the moment. And I think I always enjoy Doctor Who much more in retrospect because I still have that thing of worrying about what the general public will think. or of what the BBC will think, or what the press will think, rather than just going, why don't I just enjoy it? You know, why don't I just, enjoy the present for what it is. What's John? So now I've realised I've been doing this slightly wrong because they get to choose 2 things for the last episode. One for the last episode and one bonus. But for one of the recent ones I chose 2 things in the last episode. I don't think I should. I think I still get to choose one, but what my guest gets to do is they get to choose their one, and then they have a bonus one, which gives us a little more insight into what they like and their thoughts, but also it gives them a chance to wipe out one of the ones I've already chosen. So I'm only choosing one thing, and that is the Brigadier saying, I just try to do the best I can because I think that's a great philosophy. It really chimes with me at the moment as a self-employed person in a time of coronavirus, in the same boat as a lot of other people, and I see people are at each other's throats. People are uncertain what's happening. There's conflicting advice coming from the government. The arts sector is really struggling. All we can do is try to do the best that we can, and if in doubt, shoot the blue guy. So what's John chosen as his thing for episode 4?
4th choice is one that I think might divide the room, and it is the incidental music and just the sound design and editing in general on Battlefield, which I think is great. Obviously the score is by Kev McCulloch, and it comes in for a lot of flack. The main criticism levelled at it seems to be that it sounds very 80s, but I think that's why I love it. Like, I'm watching a show made in the 80s, I want it to sound like the 80s. But I think the score, like, sure, maybe elements of it detract from the action, but I think in general it really works. It can be quite playful at times when the script calls for it, and it can also be quite dark, so we get a lot of those sort of strange synthy string sounds, like we see in Silver Nemesis as well. Yeah, I love it, and the way that the score quite often bleeds into the sound effects. So, like with the sword and like when the destroyer comes along and stuff. I really like that. I think I could hum most of the score of Battlefield to you. I won't. Don't worry. Yeah, I think it's very ingrained in my head, but possibly more so than the incidental music from any other Doctor Who story.
Ah, that's interesting. I like the and Kev McCulloch stuff does come in for a lot of stick. It's interesting, yes, that criticism. Oh, it sounds very 80s. Well, that's because it was made in the 80s. It's like when programs now have things in front of them going, this, just to warn viewers, this displays attitudes that were prevalent at the time. Well, yeah, that's because it was made then. This has failed to see what the social mores and accepted phraseology of the future would be. May as well say, this house is full of VHS tapes, which aren't playable these days. Now, I can confidently guess, though, that his favourite thing, number 5, is not going to be Xiao Yung. Poor old Xiao Yung. She's never going to be on anybody's favourite list. But what could it be? I've no idea. But I'm going to put good money on that, just because.
My final choice of a favourite thing. And like I said earlier, it has been hard because I love lots of things. And I feel bad missing some of them out. But I've chosen, I guess the location filming, location scouting in Battlefield, I think is top notch. I think I'm quite old school in that I think Doctor Who often works best when it is jaunting around the English countryside in a very Pertwee era fashion. And I think Battlefield does a great job of this. I guess it partly plays to my prejudices as well, as someone who grew up in the countryside. Just seeing that reflected in my favourite TV show. But yeah, Battlefield has loads of really nice looking locations. Like, it's very green. which obviously suits this sort of pastoral Arthurian story that's going on. So like the Gorkrow Hotel, great building, that strange sort of ruined castle folly thing that Morgaine sets up shop in, that's great, excellent building. The Vortigern's Lake, like, get some lovely shots of that, and also lots of little drive down country lanes. I mean, accompanied by some terrible special effects, but can't have everything. So yeah, that's my final choice, and I think we're done. Boom. I've been Jon Turner. You can find me online if you want to. This is jonturner.com. John without an H, in the Pertwee fashion. And this is Jon Turner on Instagram as well. Thanks everyone. Thanks Toby. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you enjoyed about Battlefield.
Oh, Jon is a lovely, lovely guy, and he's a very talented artist. And the reason I was looking around, for those of you on the video at the point, is because every time I've done an episode of Battlefield, I've had a piece of Jon's artwork by me, so that at the end I can show it to you. And I thought, well, I'll wait till episode 4. And of course, I've done episode 4. Where the hell have I put it? So hang on, because I can edit. This isn't the one I had out. This isn't the one I had out. This is another one I've gone to get, because the one I had out is somewhere. But it's I bought a bulk of these for Jon a doctor ago, because for those who are on the podcast who can't see this, it's a card, blank inside, handmade, of a print that Jon have done of the top of every doctor's head, or their silhouette of their head, their hair and hat, to make a question mark with Capaldi as the dot, and it's a lovely piece of artwork, and indicative of the sort of stuff that he does. He does non-Doctor Who stuff. He has stalls that he does, but he's also got online, and he's a very skilled guy. He's also a very, very nice guy, and he's been very helpful to Excess Malarkey, the comedy club that I run every Tuesday, and is a valued member of the team. So please do check Jon out. Something I forgot to say is that, I don't know if you remember the TV show Soap Stars, where a load of actors, amateur and professional, went through a series of auditions. It was like Pop Stars, one of those shows, but it was to get a regular role in Emmerdale. And actually, this is never said, that Mark Jardine, who was the male, who won the role of the father in The Family and was a regular in Emmerdale, therefore for, I think any of them only lasted 9 months. But anyway, he was the successful winner and has had a decent career since. I think it gave him a bit of a springboard. He is one of the unit soldiers. He's an extra in Battlefield, and that is never covered. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest was Jon Turner. My thanks to this episode's featured patrons, who are Stephen Moffat, not that one, Sean McAllister, Darren Howard, Sarah Krotzer, Rob Dawson, Stephen White, Matthew Houliston, Sebastian April, Mark Aldridge, Anthony Carroll, Gregory Hudson, Rich Wiggins, Kevin West, Hendrik Korzeniowski, and Duncan Harvey. The music for the podcast is by Dave Gates, and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Please rate and review this podcast wherever you get it from, and a 5-star rating always helps as well. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can support me at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke or at kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. But whatever, thanks so much for downloading and listening to this, and I hope you enjoyed it and come back for more. In the meantime, I hope all your places are very, very happy.